Mary as an unmarried pregnant teen at that time in history. Dr. Martin is an OBGYN professor at East Tennessee State University and has made multiple trips to the Middle East to educate physicians there. Prior to becoming a professor, he delivered babies for 20 years. Welcome, Dr. Olsen.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today. This particular talk's been bouncing around in my skull for about 7 years, so it's nice to have a chance to finally share it. So delivering babies was just a wonderful time it was wonderful to have that respect of the patients. It was wonderful to have a chance to share that important part of their life. And it was wonderful to see the transitions of fear and terror and joy and understanding that all took place in the space of a couple of hours. Is that better? Is that better? All right, good. In the Middle East, I'm going to talk about the Middle East of 2,000 years ago, but there are some things that haven't changed. It's a culture that's different from the American culture. It's a culture that, to understand the biblical phrases, I think it's important to pay attention to how things were actually different there than we see them today. So the first thing I'd like you to do is to confront your biases. And so let's look at our bulletin. I'm glad this picture was there because I want everybody to take a look at Mary. And it's a beautiful painting. She's wonderful. She's perfect. She's beautiful. This is not who we're talking about today. Now we're going to talk today about a scared pregnant teenager and what it may have been like to be the mother of somebody 2,000 years ago. So I'm going to talk, towards the end, I will read the Gospel of Luke to you, chapter 2, verses 1 through 19. So let's talk about how we got Luke. How do we get that? I'm going to read the King James Version because I like the poetry. So Jesus spoke in Aramaic, and then for about 2 generations, the Aramaic phrases were shared from one person to the next, and then about 2 generations later, somebody wrote it down in Greek, and there are many Greek manuscripts. There are so many Greek manuscripts that the differences between them outnumber the words of the New Testament. Some of these Greek manuscripts were compiled into the King James Bible. There was a predecessor who wrote in English, and he was burned at the stake. But 100 years later, a committee got together, used some of his work, some of their own work, and created the King James Version, which we'll read. So when I say the authors and what do the authors mean, there's a whole bunch of people here. And what the authors meant when they passed the words around, and what the authors meant when they wrote in Greek, and what the authors meant when they wrote the King James Version, may not be what we hear today. Maybe we're hearing some other versions. And it took some of my experiences to make me think maybe I should go back and confront my own biases. So I'm asking you today to put a big ban sign over her and try to open your mind to complete new possibilities. So I've asked you to confront your biases. I'll tell you mine. You need to know that. So I was raised as a Lutheran, and late in adolescence, like many of the audience, I had my phase where I began questioning organized religion. I dropped out of organized religion for about a decade, and then as a young parent, found the Unitarian Church. I was a Unitarian for about 15 years, and then we had a divorce. And now, to quote Thomas Jefferson, I am a sect unto myself. And that actually, for creating this talk, that actually had some value, and I'll get to that in a little bit later. So, what was their historic Jesus? I mean, if we're going to talk about Jesus' mother, we have to confirm there was really a person named Jesus. And I think the preponderance of historians would say yes. So certainly the Christian historians would say yes. Certainly the Islamic historians would say yes. I think the secular historians, I think the Hindu historians would say yes. And he was mentioned by Roman historians within a couple of generations of his life. So I think the preponderance of data is that there really was a person named Jesus. And I think the preponderance of data is that he changed the world. He said, love your neighbor as yourself. He wasn't the first to say it. He wasn't the last to say it. He said it the loudest. He said it in a way that we still hear 2,000 years later. And I'm going to talk to you about how his mother may have influenced that. So I'm going to digress a little bit to Islam because it was my study of Islam that made me think maybe I should look at my own tradition a little bit more closely. So Islam has many prophets. You'll recognize some of them, such as Prophet Solomon, Prophet David, Prophet Jesus. Yes, there's a Prophet Mary. Mary is the only woman mentioned by name in the Quran. All the other women are mentioned as wife of thus and so. So Mary is important enough in the Quran to have her own name mentioned, which makes her significantly different than all the other women. Prophet Muhammad is the last and final prophet. There will be no prophets after Muhammad. Now, one of the important tenets of the Islamic religion is there is no God but God. So there is no Son of God, there's no saints, there's no intermediaries. So the Unitarians and the Islamic belief do have significantly in common. So I'm now going to read to you from the Holy Quran, as soon as I find my glasses, the birth story from the Holy Quran. And of course, the stories they have their own miracles in the Quran. So the Quran and the Bible have some of the same people, but different lessons to go along with the people. So here's from the Holy Quran. This is Mary's birth experience. So she conceived him, and she retired with him to a remote place. And the pains of childbirth drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. She cried in her anguish, "Ah, would that I had died before this! Would that I had been a thing forgotten!" At length she brought the babe to her people, carrying him in her arms. They said, "O Mary, truly a strange thing hast thou brought. O sister of Aaron, thy father was not a man of evil, nor thy mother a woman unchaste." But she pointed to the babe. They said, "How can we talk to one who is a child in the cradle?" The babe said, "I am indeed a servant of Allah. He hath given me revelation and made me a prophet." So I read that and I said, now where did she come from? This is a strong woman. I mean, I'm used to this. I thought Mary was just a shallow person, did whatever she's told. I go to the Islamic religion, everybody tells me women are second-class citizens, and this strong woman pops out of there. I was rather surprised. So I thought maybe I should just take a look at my own traditions, make my own decisions. So let's go to some Catholic traditions here. This is the Maria Loreto Litany. So this is very supportive of your picture in the bulletin. I'm going to abbreviate it in the interest of time. Holy Mary, Holy Mother of God, Holy Virgin of Virgins, Mother of Christ, Mother of the Church of Divine Grace, Mother most pure, Mother most chaste, Mother inviolate, Queen of Prophets, Queen of Apostles, Queen of Martyrs, Queen of Confessors, Queen of Virgins, Queen of the Most Holy Rosary, Queen of the Family, Queen of Peace. You get the idea, this is a person of perfection. She is not popular with religious liberals. So let me quote Rosemary Radford Ruther. Mariology in classical Catholicism is set against historic women as representatives of carnal femaleness. Mary was a spiritual lady in whose service one rejected real carnal females. And then a former Episcopal Bishop John Shelby Spong, he is frequently quoted by religious liberals. This is what he's written on the biblical portrayal of women. Women were made to feel guilty because they were women, guilty if they menstruated, guilty if they loved a man, guilty if they got married, guilty if they had children. There was only one virtuous woman, and she was a virgin mother. So you've got two sides of the story. And then along comes little Marty from Johnson City, Tennessee, who says, they're both wrong. So I'm going to have to defend that for you, aren't I? Well, first, I'll have to admit that when I was Unitarian, I would have probably gone with the religious liberals and accepted that. But as a sect of one, I'm allowed to question everybody. So that's what I began doing. So as far as the religious liberals go, I think they've made two errors. Error one was they didn't go back to the original source. They reacted to what they heard from the religious fundamentalists. They didn't go back to the original source. But question two is, we have to ask, when was the Maria Loreto Litany written? Well, it was written in the 1550s. It became official by the Pope about 1588. So where are women today, and where are men? Women have problems today. They get paid less than men. A woman in Georgia that says, "I don't want a C-section," too bad. We're taking the OR. She can't refuse it. There's a difference. We have to admit it. Where were men in 1600 and where were women in 1600? Big difference. Go marry thus and so. Bride prices. The difference was significant. In Middle Ages Europe, an Islamic scholar came to visit, and he wrote home to his colleagues in the Middle East, and he said, "Women in Europe are treated wonderfully. I can't figure it out." So I asked, and what they said was that in Europe they worship Mary, and so since they worship Mary, they have to treat all the other women well. So perhaps 500 years ago, the Maria Laredo Litany was meant to elevate women, and then 450 years later, the same tool is used to hold them down. So rather than criticizing the Maria Laredo Litany as it's used today, we should step back and try to think about the original authors. So that would be my second criticism of the religious liberal approach. All right, so that is our opening remarks as we now move into who was Mary and what might have she have been like. Well, I've told you she's a teenager, so your question is prove it. So looking at Roman data, we don't have data for Roman subjects. We have data for members of the empire. We don't have data for the people out there on the periphery. But the average age of marriage was 17. We have data on the first menstrual period. The first menstrual period was age 15 or 16 in that time period. The Bible says that Mary was too young to be married. She was betrothed. So she's too young to be married, but she's old enough to conceive and bear a child. So I think she's probably 16 or 17 when she gives birth. And I think we can probably, with the data we have, I think she's 16 or 17. Well, how dangerous was it to be an unwed 16-year-old 2,000 years ago in the Middle East? Well, how dangerous is it to be an unwed 16-year-old today in certain areas of the world? In the Taliban-controlled area in Central Asia today, a woman who's raped and conceives is probably going to be receive an honor killing. She shamed her community, and so she dies because of the pregnancy. We know that this happened 2,000 years ago. If you'll remember John 8, verse 7, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Well, that was a woman accused of adultery. And so we know there was an attempted honor killing that Jesus broke up. And as we started thinking about the influence of his mother on his life, keep in mind that that could have been his own mother a generation before. And that maybe this is an example of how his mother began to influence him at a young age. So she's got to survive being pregnant. So in the biblical version, she gets a little help from Joseph. In the Islamic version, she handles it all by herself. She gets through this, and now she's got to go through labor. So again, how dangerous was labor 2,000 years ago? Again, we can answer it. How dangerous is labor today? If you live in rural Iraq, the death rate is 1% per pregnancy. If you lived in England in 1830s, it's 1% per pregnancy. In Ireland in the 1730s, it's 1% per pregnancy. In the United States today, in a religious sect that does not allow medical care, it's 1% per pregnancy. In Afghanistan, it's actually worse. It's 2 to 6%. So in my own case, my grandmother could explain to me the names of her family members who died in pregnancy. So it was a common event to die in pregnancy. And there's every reason for Mary to have been terrified about labor. One of the things that's nice for a laboring woman to have is family support. And that family support helps her through the process. And Mary did not have family support. Because if you'll remember, Mary had to travel from Nazareth to Bethlehem. That's a journey of 68 to 80 miles, depending on which website you find. She had to walk. I'm going to assume she walked because the carpenter might not have been able to afford a donkey for her to ride on, but maybe have. She either walked or rode a donkey. Neither of them sounds very comfortable to me if you're 9 months pregnant. So she's alone. And she is, the stable, remember the stable? Remember this nice little barn with warm straw to snuggle in? That's not what they had in the Middle East 2,000 years ago. They had caves. So it's a grotto. It's a cold, dark cave with some smelly animals and the manure around on the cold floor. Now, as an obstetrician, one of the things that fascinated me was the resilience of some of these young mothers. So, true story. This poor woman, she's been up for 24 hours. She's exhausted. She has her baby about 3 o'clock in the morning. I come in to check on her about 7 o'clock, and she says, Dr. Olsen, I haven't had time to put my makeup on yet. Hey, we're normal. We got a new kid here. We've just gone through the most terrifying, exhilarating experience of life. Normal. We're back to normal. So that resilience is just, to me, fascinating. And I think we're going to find that perhaps Mary had some of that resilience too. So I will now read Luke 2, chapters 1 through 19. But I want you to think about a scared pregnant teenager in a cave, far from home, who has survived an unwed pregnancy and has survived labor. When we now read these words that are very familiar. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. And all went to be taxed, every one into his own city. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, out of the city of Nazareth, into Judea, unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be taxed with Mary, his espoused wife, being great with child. And so it was that, while they were there, the days were accomplished that she should be delivered. And she brought forth her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And there were in the same country shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock by night. And lo, the angel of the Lord came upon them, and the glory of the Lord shone round about them, and they were sore afraid. And the angel said unto them, Fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And this shall be a sign unto you, ye shall find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes, lying in a manger. And suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host, praising God and saying, Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. And it came to pass, as the angels were gone away from them into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, Let us now go even unto Bethlehem, and see this thing which is come to pass, which the Lord hath made known unto us. And they came with haste, and found Mary and Joseph and the babe lying in a manger. And when they had seen it, they made known abroad the saying which was told them concerning this child. And all they that heard it wondered at those things which were told them by the shepherds. But Mary kept all these things, and pondered them in her heart. Mary kept all these things, and pondered them in her heart. So I think I found her. I think I found that self-reliant woman who's gone through experiences which could have crushed some other person, and it made her stronger. You know, she's in a cave, it's cold, and here come a bunch of shepherds in this ear. And she doesn't throw them out. She shows off her baby. After what she's been through, what's a bunch of shepherds? The angels, yeah, they can blow their trumpets, but who's going to be doing the work around here? It's the 17-year-old new mom that's going to do the work. So I think I have described an extremely stressful pregnancy and birth experience. Now, stressful events can crush a person, or they can bring out that person's inner strengths. And I postulate that these inner strengths helped Mary become a good parent for her son. How could a woman change the world 2,000 years ago? Pretty rare. I mean, you got your Cleopatras, but she had a few $1 billion in today's money to help her do that. For a woman like Mary, for a peasant woman in the Middle East, there was really only one way to change history, and that was to change the men around you in the hopes that they would change history. So let's put aside for a while the religious icon and think about the possibility that these stories are meant to convey another lesson. And that lesson could be that Mary was a scared adolescent who did the best she could with what she had, and then went on to raise a child who changed the world. Thank you.